see everybody. I remembered my device, my clicker this morning. We're back in business. Good to see everybody. Thanks for coming out. Looks like we're getting the PowerPoint architectural slides all lined up here. So, any introductions, any announcements? What's going on? Who's this gentleman back here with the distinguished looking white mustache here, right? You, sir. I know you.
Clinton Smith with State Engineering.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Good to see you, Mr. Smith. Thanks for coming. Anybody here for the first time?
I'm being told someone here needs to introduce themselves.
Yeah, you guys are ahead of me. Congressman Downing.
Thanks for that. I'm happy to be here, and it's been, I'm sure you can imagine, a crazy time in D.C., but just happy to be back in Montana. Just got back last night. I just want to say, when I was landing, I got all the messages about that tragedy at the airport, and our thoughts and prayers are with the families. It sounds like it was pretty bad, but here.
Yeah, Troy, if you don't mind me calling you Troy.
No, that's not anything. You can just whistle too, I don't care.
Well, really, welcome back. Thanks for working us in. I know it's busy when you're back in the state. Everybody wants to see you, and you want to see everybody. But what happened back there with that airplane?
Well, they're still investigating, but just going by what I saw in the video, looks like there was an Army Black Hawk helicopter, an A-60, that somehow collided with that, I think it was an American Airlines, it was a regional jet coming in on approach, and it was just tragic. The plane broke into 3 pieces, landed in the Potomac, and from what I understand, there were 64 victims on the plane and 3 crew members, Army members on the Black Hawk. But again, just tragic to see that. I don't know. A lot of times when you're not a pilot, so a lot of times when you're the air traffic control point out traffic, they'll say, "Do you see the traffic at your 2 o'clock?" Or they'll see if you say, and you'll say yes. And I did notice on the video there was another plane in the vicinity, so sometimes you can misidentify and say you have the traffic in sight and not see in the void. And it's just speculation at this point, but that's really all I can add to that, is that's a possible explanation.
Wow. Well, I'm sure sorry about that. I mean, we all are. A moment of silence or something, perhaps.
Well, keep their families in your prayers.
We will. We will. Well, Congressman, since you're here, what else is going on? Kind of a shake-up, it seems.
Well, one thing I will say, obviously, the beginning of the session, there's a lot of, formation, there's a lot of putting the committees together. Is it me or is it Mike?
Danny, what the heck is going on?
Can you hear me if I just talk loud? Yeah. So a lot of it has been...
The Zoomers can.
Yeah, go up to the front.
Yeah, just go through it.
Sorry, I didn't...
No, that's fine.
See what happens when you wander in one
It's just great to see you here. No.
I think this one might be better.
Okay, is that... Oh, perfect. A lot of it has been formational, forming basically the makeup of the committees and getting ready to get to work. So a lot of that has been going on. And I will say one of the things, I was talking to somebody about this earlier, that really gives me a lot of hope about the 119th Congress is there's a little over 60 freshmen coming in. And I've gotten to know the freshmen of the 119th Congress pretty well. And a lot of background, military background, business background, legislative background. But the one thing that really gives me promise is, without any exception, the people that I've met and been working with are showing up because they want to govern. And I think that's refreshing. You know, people are understanding that we have to work together, that we have to deliver for the American people. And even though we're in the formational process of that right now, it gives me a lot of hope, because that's what I'm going to. I'm going to represent the people in this room, the people in my district, to make sure that we are actually delivering and actually governing, and not just standing. Ironically, I'm standing at a thing right now, but not just standing on a hill trying to make headlines, but actually trying to deliver. And I feel good about that. And one of the things that I'm really happy for is they told me I couldn't get this as a freshman, but I worked really hard getting onto an A committee, onto financial services, because it lined up with what I did for the last 4 years as the state auditor, you know, regulating insurance and securities. So, you know, to continue on with that, and then also have, you know, a tech background like I do, I think is really germane to what we're going to see in, you know, in banking and insurance and securities and everything that we do in financial services, as we try to navigate what we're going to do with, you know, digital currencies, blockchain, distributed ledgers, artificial intelligence is, you know, a huge opportunity, but incredibly scary. How do we deal with that stuff? So I'm really excited about being on that committee to deliver on that. And then the other part is just making sure that Montana has a voice. One of the things that was interesting to me as, you know, a state regulator is how much federal policy tried to assert something on a rural state that just didn't work, and there just wasn't a voice. I mean, like the simplest example is in insurance, network adequacy. And I get something from the, you know, from the feds, from the Center of Medicaid Medicare Services, saying here's what we need you to do for network adequacy to have an insurance program in your 56 counties. And their criteria was you had to have all these providers within 15 minutes or 30, you know, 15 miles or 30 minutes. And I'm going, well, I've got you expect me to have all these providers in counties where I may have, you know, 3,000 people total. How many of those do you think are, you know, anesthesiologists or oncologists or whatever, all these things? And some of the stuff just doesn't work in a rural state. We need to have, you know, our own solutions that work here. And not having that understanding coming down from DC was really compelling to me. And so now I'm in DC, so I'm part of that delegation, so I can let them know what does and doesn't work in a predominantly rural state. And I'm really, you know, excited about that opportunity and excited about continuing to do that work.
Wow.
Sorry, I wasn't expecting to talk. I was just coming to say hi.
Well, thank you, Congressman Donnelly. We really appreciate your work in the Senate.
Thanks, I appreciate that. And you know what, I'm here to serve you. We've got an office in Helena. You know, come in if you've got problems, questions. You know what my goal is on this. You know, in my tenure in Congress is to make sure that we're setting a bar by which others should be measured in terms of constituent services. If you have problems, reach out, let us know, and I promise you your call will be answered, and somebody's going to work on it. So, honored to be here. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Let's take that over to Senator Dunwell. I see. You got to ask her how you doing up there, Senator Dunwell. I saw you on TV presenting a bill. Looked like Senate Judiciary Committee.
Yeah, thank you. It was a good bill. We worked together with some partners, came to an agreement, and had a good hearing, and then they wasted no time to table it. So, yeah, that's. So let's see. I'm oh for 5. I don't know.
Oh boy.
3 bills so far, and yeah, it's what are you going to do? So we do what we can. I mean, I've already, I'm working with some moderate Republicans to carry a couple bills. One is one that a constituent and I have been working on for 1.5 years to provide no charge online training to school bus drivers on human trafficking prevention, just the signs to look for. You know that they have these trainings, these science-based trainings on signs of suicide, well, there's signs of human trafficking. So, Senator Mike Yakovich has offered to carry that, and it's supported by the Billings human trafficking task force and truckers against trafficking and a whole bunch of places. But yeah, so that's life as a minority party in really, you know, I thought it couldn't get any worse last session, but it has. I mean, you know, we have the, one of the people in high leadership in the Senate, she's been taken off of the ethics committee because of alleged unethical behavior, and we have the former president of the Senate last session up on, you know, going to the ethics committee because of alleged shady contracts. So that's unfortunate that that's all going on, because we could be spending our time working on affordable housing and getting those property taxes down for residents, and you know, healthcare statewide Medicaid expansion. Congressman Downing talked about some of the healthcare issues, and you know, we could get those going. I have to tell you that when news came out that the federal government was freezing federal grant money the other day, oh my gosh,
Lit out, huh?
the governor didn't want it out, but they were reeling. What the heck are we going to do? And because you know, transportation, money for Montana's roads and bridges, and I mean, you name it, healthcare, air traffic controllers. I have to tell you, it crossed my mind, and this is the really maybe not logical part of my mind, but it crossed my mind. Now, what if some of them didn't come in yesterday because they thought, well, they wouldn't have a job anyway? Okay, so I'm going to stop rambling.
Yeah.
But, you know, we keep going in there every day, and we will not be defeated. We, who represent the public and your interests, sorry, I'm talking politically, do know, however, all these shenanigans are being conducted by a very small number of senators and representatives at the Capitol. They just happen to be in high leadership positions. Most of us are finding ways to work together and really service people. You know, one of the reasons I hand over my bills is because I don't care who gets the credit, I care who gets the benefit. That sounds like a line, but you know, I've already been in the lights and was a news anchor and all of that, news reporter, but it really, I mean, our country and our state is in a sad state. And so there is hope, there's us, and my friend and I were just talking about that 250th anniversary of our country, Declaration of Independence, next year coming up, and we're going to have something to celebrate.
Well, there's always hope. Remember Pandora's box? A little jewel at the bottom of it was hope. Well, thanks for coming this morning, Senator Dunwell. I know you're busy, and you gotta take a lot of rejection if you get into your line of work, but there's always hope. Well, what do you say we step up to local government for just a moment, because I see Commissioner Shurtleff here. If you don't mind, let's just hear from... I said step up, Andy. It's you know, the highest level of government. You know, they used to ask me, they say, well, do you have a higher office in mind? And I'd say, there's no higher office than local government. So what's going on in our fair city, Andy?
Thank you very much, Jim. I don't know if that was a marijuana joke or not, saying there's no higher office. I don't partake myself. So thank you, Congressman Downing, for being here today. My wife worked with him at the Commissioner of Securities and Insurance, and she really enjoyed it. And they've got an excellent team over there, and so I appreciated how the Congressman and his staff worked on behalf of the state of Montana. At the local level, I know I've had conversations with Senator Dunwell regarding Montana Avenue. And there's some conversation and concern about who owns that street, who maintains it. Well, around the Capitol, the state of Montana maintains those roads. our city Department of Transportation has worked with the state, encouraged them, and offered assistance in making that route safer from 6th up to Broadway. We've had a lot of conversations. I've had a lot of people grabbing my collar and saying, why aren't you guys doing anything? We're trying, and we're working with our friends at the state, and we appreciate Senator Dunwell who's working up in the halls on behalf of Helena to get that route fixed. A couple other items, we've received some raised grants to reinvigorate some of our infrastructure. One of which is between Blue Cross Blue Shield, to connect Blue Cross Blue Shield up to over to the Maverick gas station south interchange. We want to do a bypass through there. We're in the planning stages for that. We received a federal grant for that. We hope that the funds are still coming. Congressman Downing, we hope we can get some. We hope the freeze is unfrozen. Also, too, is somebody that drives on Montana Avenue occasionally. I've been stuck behind that train. One of the raised grants that we got is to look at digging either a tunnel or an overpass over the railroad crossing. We're still working on that, but I know there's been proposals in the past. Things change price, and I think it'll be really good for Montana. I think it'll be really good for Montana Avenue and Helena. It's one of the main reasons why, that railroad crossing is one of the main reasons why we went to bat for a new fire station on the north side of the tracks. Because it's difficult to get to that side. Most of the fires are starting to happen on that side of the tracks. The growth's happening on that side. We're gonna break ground hopefully this next fall on a new fire station, the third one. It's actually the first in 45 years. We need people to fill that, but the fire trucks are getting stuck on Montana Avenue. It's hard to do a 3-point turn on Montana Avenue, but we're working hard for you. Yeah, happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much, Jim.
All right, thank you, Andy. Thanks for coming this morning. Em's got something for us, and then Sean, come on up. We'll hear from Emily and then turn to Sean Whitewolf.
So tonight is the point in time survey. It starts today. We have enough volunteers for today, but we'll be serving 4 meals and gathering people. We'll be at our place off of National in the old Restore. We'll be at God's Love at St. Paul's United Methodist Church, and then out at East Helena United Methodist Church. Those start at 4 o'clock. We'll be serving meals to people. If they want to come, grab a meal, do a survey. We've had a lot of outreach from other people because the survey actually goes on for the next week. We can find people, we do shelter counts. So if anybody knows of people living out in the community that we might not reach today, let us know because we can go find people and do surveys for the next 7 days. And we would love to find any of those tucked away camps, campers, cars, folks that are just out there, just so we get a real accurate number as much as we possibly can and get people connected to services. And the next piece of that is that we work with the COAD, the Community Organizations Active in Disaster. One of the projects that we're working on with that group is we've purchased 50 fire extinguishers. We have buckets, and we're working on getting the carbon monoxide detectors for people that live in campers and uncommon housing that uses heating systems that are not very safe. So we'll be working on handing out those safety kits between the case conferencing group and the rural fire departments to people so that if they do have a fire situation, they'll have the safety things that they need, fire extinguishers and things like that, so they can hopefully safely get out. Because if a fire starts in a camper, there's virtually no way to stop it. And so we're working on that as part of the COAD, and there will be a project through the Red Cross that will happen in the spring. So as much as we can connect with people living in campers out in the outskirts of town right now, the better. And then today is also Nonprofit Day up at the Capitol. There will be 200 nonprofits from around the state gathering up at the Rotunda throughout the day to just discuss what it means to be a nonprofit in Montana. So if you guys want to know more about that, we'll be rallying up there all day.
Something at noon?
We start at 8:30. We'll be there until 8:30 to 3.
All right, very good. Thanks, Emily. Yeah. Sean.
Good morning. I'm Sean Whitewolf, representing the Helena area Crime Stoppers, and we have a enough money for the year and the next year. But what we're struggling with is to get a board member to be on our board. So we really are seeking one right now that we need is very important before April. So if anybody's interested, I really appreciate you reaching out to me. Our website is Helena Area Crime Stoppers, and thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Yeah, that's a good opportunity for somebody to step up and get involved. Dan, Pocha, what's...
You know, talking about the legislature, I was invited up a couple weeks ago by Susan Weber from the Blackfeet Nation, because opening day she asked for a smudge room at the Capitol from the powers that it be, and by golly, they gave one on the 3rd floor, but they said they couldn't smudge in it. So she asked me to come up because I fought that battle a couple times and wanted to give her some information, and I told her, Article 10, Section 2 of the Montana State Constitution says you should preserve and promote Native culture in the great state of Montana, and I gave her all of that information, and it's nice to report that they realized how ridiculous that rooms are, and said that they could smudge in that room. And even in the rotunda, because I told her I'd smudged in the rotunda with the governor on several occasions, so it wasn't like that was a necessity. But they said, they were trying to preserve that building because it was a historical building, and I told her to go back and look at the dedication pictures of that and see how many people in big black hats were smoking great big cigars as they dedicated that building. And she reminded me that they used to have a smoking room in the basement of the Capitol, but they had to remove that because the first woman that was elected to the great state of Montana had to go across the street to use the restroom. So we've come a long ways. Not really, we're still looking for restrooms in the Capitol. Thank you.
Good work, Dan. Thank you. Well, we've got some distinguished guests with us this morning, but maybe we got a moment. John Seck seems to be back there. President Seck.
Just a quick moment, Congressman Downing, it's always great to have you here, and we're so fortunate in Montana to have such access to our congressional members. Victoria and I will be in D.C. This weekend, next week for the Association of Catholic College Presidents meeting, and we'll be seeing the congressman up on the Hill on Tuesday. What I really want to talk about is Saints basketball. Tonight at 5 o'clock, number 20 in the nation, the Saints women will take on Montana Tech. Boo! They've been our arch nemesis for 100+ years. And then the men will take on Montana Tech at 7 o'clock. Boo again. And hope you come join us. All right, thanks. Go Saints.
Barb Harris and Peter Sullivan are planning to go to that. So, very good. Thank you, John. And travel safely. Are these Congressman Downing's classes? They're Tim Meldrum's. Okay. Well, we do have some distinguished guests with us this morning from the architectural community. And Tom McGree from Ascent Bank is sort of the gentleman who invited these people to be with us and kind of lined it up. And Tom, maybe you could talk a little bit and introduce Tim and our guests.
So as a banker, we rely on architects and engineers to know how much work we're going to have to do in the next couple of months or couple of years. And so we called Tim and Matt and Scott from their respective firms, from SMA, Mosaic, and Slate, just to talk about what's going on in Montana and what to expect for the next 12 months. So I'll let Tim introduce his crew, if that's all right, and then they can kind of explain what's going on. They're going to give us about 15-20 minutes of really highly intelligent insight into the next 12 months. And they like hard questions, right? Oh, okay. Oh, yes. So Scott's starting first? Yeah. Okay. So Scott is with Slate Architecture. He's the principal there, and let you give your background. How about that?
Good morning, everybody. I'm short, so I like to stand, if that's all right, and everybody at home as well. Today, what I want to do, we put together about 7 quick slides just to kick us off to talk about what we do, some of the projects we've done, but we really want to just visit with you. We've got a series of questions that we started just to kick up, and then from there, we just really want to we're all collaborative firms. We all work in a studio setting, and so we just love to interact and enjoy each other. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Matt. Matt's going to kick us off about what he does.
Hey everybody. Man, what a group started today, so we have a lot to follow up here. So I'm Matt Ani with Mosaic Architecture. I'm actually born and raised in Helena and started at Mosaic when I was actually in high school. I built models there. Kind of knew what I wanted to be when I was really young. I was very lucky. And I came back to Helena to come back to be part of this community with you guys and just really love what I do at Mosaic. And we are mostly a commercial civic firm, but we do some housing. The housing we do is more of that multifamily residential, so some low income. There's not a ton of it in Montana. It's getting better. That comes down to policies in our local government and our federal government. So it's something we are always trying to find those projects, but it takes really good developers and a really good overall team and a community commitment to that.
Good morning, I'm Tim Meldrum with SMA Architecture and Design. I think I have a slightly different story than Matt with regard to knowing what I wanted to do. It took me, I was a slow learner on what I wanted to do. I went to U of M for a while, spent 3 long years looking for the School of Architecture and realized they didn't have one. But I did find my wife, so that was a plus. And then after graduating from MSU, I went to Seattle, worked for a big firm out there for a while, and then had an opportunity to buy into a firm here in Helena and raise a family. And being a Montana kid from Chester, we just wanted to come back to Montana and have that same experience for our kids. I've grown the firm from 7 people to 41 and really have the great fortune of being in this community. It is such an excellent community and we've benefited from that greatly, so much gratitude. We do work across the spectrum, I think, similar to these guys. You can't really have this kind of business in a state like Montana and not do just about everything. So we do housing all the way to nuclear missile alert facilities, super complicated to super simple. We just want to keep people busy and be able to help where we can, which we're going to talk about a little more today. Thanks, Tim. Again, Scott Cromwell, originally from Flaxville, Montana. I don't know if very many people know where that is, but yeah, Lynn would know, Circle guy. But yes, I got my start in architecture in 5th grade. That's when I knew I wanted to become an architect, even though I grew up a rancher. It wasn't a big enough place, and so I went elsewhere. I went to Montana State. From there, I went to Omaha, Nebraska, and worked for 6 years before we came back. My wife from White Sulphur, and we knew, the same as Tim, we wanted to raise a family back in Montana, where we both grew up. So I had the opportunity almost 25 years ago now to come back, and so I've been here ever since. And we've taken our firm from 4 people when it first started to now we're at 15. And so it's been a great run. We focus mostly on the top 3 are education, medical, and then government work. And so we're in that, but we'll work on anything. We're in Montana, as Tim mentioned, you have to. We've done transmission shops, we've done sandwich shops. Sometimes they're in the same building. And so it's just an opportunity that we take. And as we get rolling and talk more about what we can do for you and help you, we're here. We're facilitators. I mean, that's the real job of an architect, is to facilitate. It's our job to pull out of your brains what you need and help you get that made. So what we want to do is just kind of talk about, not only are we architects, but we're also builders. We also have our own spaces. We're each in our own spaces, and all 3 of us, just recently, within probably the last 6 years, Matt even sooner, have created our own spaces to work in. So start with you.
Yeah, so I think one thing that's exciting about this group is we look at our community and how can we help not only our offices, but how can we take these older kind of buildings that people are sort of afraid of and aren't willing to take the risk on, And all three of us found these buildings and probably worked, like our story, with many, many clients studying, could it be all housing, could it be mixed use, what should it really be? And after kind of falling in love with it, knowing more about them, and knowing what we do, we weren't as afraid to take them on. But we took the risk and converted some really great older buildings in town to much better spaces. So we understand if people out there that are afraid to take these on. We're here to help, because all three of us at all of these city firms understand that risk. We were all afraid at one point in time. We built ours right in the middle of COVID, and I can tell you that it was a challenge. And so we really understand not just the design, the great pictures, we understand what the financial fear and ramifications and how the whole process works. So we are here to really answer any questions at any time to help you guys make projects a reality. And these were scary projects, all of them in some fashion.
Yeah, I'll definitely echo what Matt said, but I do have to say, if you haven't seen the Independent where Mosaic is, and there's multiple businesses in there, but it's an amazing building and a great story, and I'm sure you can see trails of Matt's blood all over the building because he fought that thing pretty hard. I think that's a lot of work. And so SMA, we had the opportunity about 8 years ago to get into the old liquor warehouse right down by the Great Northern Hotel, right at the end of the south end, or the north end of downtown. And I remember, 12 or 13 years ago, walking by that building thinking, boy, wouldn't that be a cool architecture firm, that old warehouse building. It was originally designed in like 1935, and I think one of the cool stories that we found interesting was the building is actually reinforced concrete, obviously columns and walls and floors, and it wasn't originally designed that way. It was load-bearing masonry, and when the earthquakes hit in 35, it actually told the designers, the architects for that project, to not do load-bearing masonry, so they changed it during construction. I think the foundations were in. So it was a really fortunate timing for the building, and that building has been here since. So stout that we cut all of the windows into that lower level. Probably 75% of the windows in that lower level were not previously there, and we never had to do any kind of steel bracing or anything, because the building was designed for forklifts and pallets of liquor originally, and then eventually the state used it for their printing office, and now we live in it as architects, and we left a lot of the stenciling and spray painting on the columns that tell a great story about the history of the building itself.
And for Slate Architecture, we are right on the corner of Roberts and Helena Avenue, and when I mention to people, they say, "Where's that?" And I said, "Well, it's just right next door to Vanilla Bean." Oh, well, yeah, then they know where that's at. And so when my wife and I moved back here in 2000, we fell in love with the 6th Ward. So we lived in the 6th Ward, and when that opportunity arose to take this building, we jumped at it immediately. We were the first one to get in there. Did a complete renovation. It used to be the Elements Consign and Design. Prior to that, it was a church, I guess. And so it's been a great opportunity for us just to be here. We love it. And as you can have seen, the 6th Ward is just starting to blow up in that area. In fact, there is a project out right now, or something with the city, that if you got the opportunity to just look through that, I think by February 7th, Commissioner Sherwood may talk about a little bit, that a roundabout in Montana, talking about all the different things that are happening at 6th Ward. So take a look at that, but we love it down here. It's been a great opportunity to just visit and be a part of the community in this area. So.
Yeah, you bet. So a few of the things we do want to just cover, I guess, is, and I don't think we're going to spend a ton of time on our process, but we want to make sure that one of the key things that most folks don't fully understand is, like, do you need an architect, and when do you need an architect? Actually, yeah, I suppose I can chime in a little bit on this slide came up, is all the other architecture firms in Helena. You can see the three of us up there, but there's Dowling Architects and CWG and Eclipse and John Mueller, I think he's still around. And so that there's been several other firms that have come and gone, and or there's maybe even some one-person practitioners, but it's a great community. It's interesting, Helena is what, maybe half the size of Bozeman, but there are 70 firms in Bozeman compared to the 6 or 7 here. So that's an interesting aspect, I think, of Helena, and that probably is a mega result of the School of Architecture in Bozeman. Nobody wants to leave once they go there, and they're going to hang their own shingle. But we also watch them struggle a bit because that is a tough competition. So, the process that we have is a little bit of timing on when you want to hire an architect and what your project may be. This slide really is going to be tough to see, but essentially it's taking us through like conceptual design. Usually somebody comes to like an engineer or a realtor, or they want to buy a piece of property, but they don't know what fits on it. They don't know what money they can make on it, and so they want to walk through a bit of a, I don't want to really make any mistakes here or a bad investment, so who could help me with that? And sometimes they can work through that themselves. It doesn't require an architect, but I do feel like you can probably assure yourself by spending a little bit on us to make sure that it's more stable in your decision making. And then it kind of moves on from there. It just gets it's like 30,000 foot view all the way down to a 1 foot view, and you work through these phases through feasibility studies, then conceptual design, and then schematic design, which is kind of really starting to understand what the building looks like with the actual program elements, which are all the spaces and how many of them. And then you'll get into design development, and that is really zooming into every single room and defining what the HVAC needs are, what the carpet is, what the electrical and data comm needs are, what the fire requirements are, what the door hardware is. Every single little thing is starting to go through design conversations and what the needs are. And then construction document phase, really that's where we're generating the contract documents for bidding process and pricing process with the contractors, where they can make it buildable. We're the American Institute of Architects make sure that we don't say that these are the instructions on how to build a building. That's actually not an appropriate term. They're called instruments of service, whatever the heck that means. But it's really that these documents are a great communication tool to define what this building is and what goes into it, and to be able to put a precise price on it. There's lots of decisions that are made through construction, but it's important that it's communicated across the board. And then I think I cruised through a couple of those, but so they go to the orange one, the next one. The questions of like, do I need an architect? That one is a little bit, I think, that we've all experienced something around, like, well, is it a house? Is it a single-family residence? Is it a commercial space? Is it a renovation? Is it new construction? All those things, really, you can always come and talk to us. I think one of the key things that we run into is that I think people think that we're similar to maybe doctors and lawyers, where, Clint, you could talk about this, where engineers and architects, we would absolutely get sent packing, I think, if we tried to charge people the moment they walked in, regardless of what the questions were. So, rest assured that reach out, ask us questions, set a meeting. There's always, our first conversations are never billed. That's impossible, because we really don't know what your needs are. We can't just start billing you. We have obviously professional expertise, but we got to get into that to understand what's appropriate to charge a person. So go ahead and feel free to ask engineers and architects if you what you may need in order to get through building permit, or even just to make sure that you're making the most efficient decisions. Sometimes people design their own houses and they totally can do that, but we've seen houses that are 7,000 square feet that honestly cost 40% more than as if you had an architect and they designed around your custom needs. You could save 30% on space and maybe increase the quality. So there's benefits to that. And then there's a couple of options on process, or on the actual type of construction. This design bid build is what everybody knows, where architects would design the project with everybody's involvement, and then we would let the bids at some point, whether public or invited, and you would get bids, and usually it's the lowest bidder, the lowest most qualified bidder, and then you build the project. A lot of projects not in Montana do design build. A lot of federal projects do design build, where you might hire the contractor first and give them a very clear set of requirements, and then they eventually they'll hire the architecture and design team, and then everybody works together to get to the price needed. But usually with contractor-led, then your design team is not necessarily contractually obligated to advocate for the owner. So it's under one contract typically. And it doesn't make it more complex, it's just a different scenario, and it fits really only certain things. Construction manager risk, that is going to be where you, it's similar to design to build. You hire, it's two contracts, you have an architect, and you have, or a design team, and you have a contractor. But that contractor, a lot of times, it could be one person, it could be an entire contracting firm, but they're going to actually take on a lot of the construction management and then hire all the contracts to actually do the work. And they're usually involved during design, where they can help with pricing and constructability conversations. And so it actually is kind of a nice hybrid almost between design build and just the regular bid process. They have a lot of value being at the table during design. A lot of times architects, we know how to construct things, how to draw things, but we might not know the day-to-day decision-making around exactly how some of these things are going together, or what systems, what products are really better to build with right now, or better pricing, or what suppliers are better to supply in the state of Montana, because that sometimes moves around, and they know that better than we do. GCCM is obviously very similar, but it happens to be, that one is where they're both the same thing. It's the same person. The construction manager is the general contractor as well. But otherwise it's essentially the same thing. And then integrated project delivery. This is kind of rare, but that's where we all kind of get together and with the owner even, and we all create a separate contracted, or a separate business almost. It's a true joint venture where we actually all create our own company and we make decisions as a group. It's actually a lot more complex, but actually can really everybody can have a stake in the game, and it's a little rare, but at the same time, I think the concept makes sense. And I kind of talked about this next one actually. Do you need an architect based on a single family residence? Maybe. Do you need one for a duplex? Maybe. We've seen a lot of people do those themselves, but by law, by code, you're not required to have an architect unless you get to more of this. It depends on the jurisdiction you're in, and then it also depends on how the project is funded. So publicly funded projects definitely require an architect, but most of the time, even when you're required to have a permit with required engineering, because like Scott said earlier, we facilitate structural engineers, civil engineers, and mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers, fire protection engineers. We're the ones that kind of bring them all together. If you want to do that yourself, then you don't need an architect a lot of times if it's just a commercial renovation or something like that. But I will say that most of the time we see that it takes a unique person that's not an architect to be able to do that. Maybe you used to be a contractor or something like that. But we always like to say it's not required, but we obviously prefer it, not just for our business, but we hate to see people make those kind of decisions and really end up with some really bad mistakes that cost them in the long run. And we're hoping that maybe there's questions related to what we do and maybe what the scene around Montana might be.
Well, one, I just really appreciate what you guys do. If I wasn't an accounting professional, I'd probably be an architect. So, since you've all been in the Valley for a long time, what would be your one or two
dream projects you would want to work on that, if I could just get a hold of that building, this is what I would do. Or that corner lot that has nothing on it, what would you build?
And you're saying here in this area?
Here, hell.
I was going to go with sports stadium, but I don't know how logical that is. Maybe John Seck can maybe pull some money together and we can redo Nelson Stadium or something. But what great question. I actually feel like I've always had my eye on, I don't want to cross any lines with regard to specifying property that we don't own or something, but the property right across the street from the Cinemark movie theater that is it's really the last vacant lot or one of them in the Great Northern area. I'd love to build like a 14-story building there that has got a mixed-use housing concept with retail, restaurants. I think that's a really dynamic space that could be drastically improved. I think that's one I would target.
Yes.
Do it. Do it.
Yeah, I think for me, so I have two younger daughters that are into sports, but I know the arc is out there. So wherever that lives, to me, so maybe back to the sports center, but you know, Helena not really having a full-size pool, doesn't really have those sort of amenities, and I think it's really missing in Helena, so that would be my dream project, whoever does that, and if we can get everyone together, that'd be mine.
And I'm in the same camp as these guys. I would really look more for affordable housing so that we can create more of that opportunity, but in a mixed use opportunity that's walkable. And so that is, I think that's where I'd like to see us go.
So if I wasn't in workers' compensation, I'd want to be an architect. What's in the pipeline? What's coming in the next few years for Helena and Montana?
It's pretty complex. Montana's rural, we're small, but it's really interesting how different Helena, Bozeman, Missoula, Kalispell, and then, you know, all the way out to Lewistown. And I know all of us at this table kind of work all over the state, so we're working in some really rural areas that, you know, like Lewistown is fairly busy. There's a lot going on there. And then in between, so Helena is actually kind of the slower moving city in comparison to those, but not necessarily a bad thing. But it's not slow. Everything is pretty busy statewide. The legislation last session through the LRPP long-range building plan funding, there's a ton of work through that going on right now, and a lot of that's about be finishing up design, or it is in design right now. So there's a lot going on. A lot of those projects the state has is actually housing for employees, so that's really awesome to see. So from DNRC to FWP to they've seen that housing need, and so we're working on it's not really affordable housing, but it's housing for employees that work for state agencies that can't afford it. So there's a bunch of exciting things that I think the state's doing. But yeah, in Helena, these affordable houses take a development team. So people have to make money to build houses. Like, no one's going to build housing and not make money on it. So people have to really think about that with affordable housing. So how can the city incentivize developers to come in to do that? So I think that's pretty critical.
Yeah, I echo that. I mean, housing is, to me, that's a super easy conversation, I think, but I will also add to housing both as the first answer as well as the resulting answer. There's a lot of great discussion and investment and attention being paid to Montana as it grows around energy, around manufacturing, and, you know, again, all the housing and support that comes along with that, and even defense, Department of Defense spending. There's just, Montana, I think, is really a great focus on many, many things that is going to be, if planned right, done really well.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Alicia Ryan with the Helena Business Improvement District. And as such, you know, we have a lot of historic buildings in our district. And I was curious, when you take on a historic building, how is that process different from maybe working on a more contemporary building or building a new building? What are the special considerations?
That's a half an hour question, maybe. But I think in a nutshell, maybe we can each address this a little bit. But if it's just a historic building, or a lot of times it's just an old building that is by default a historic building, and you're not using any kind of public funding for it, and you're not trying to get any tax credits for it, then a lot of times it can be more of an adaptive reuse concept. And we take care on understanding what the original architecture was, and we want to try to find that through even a modernization of the building. But what's interesting, one of the hardest things with historic buildings is keeping that exposed as much as possible while meeting the current energy code. Because a lot of times you got to cover up all the brick masonry walls either on the outside or the inside because they don't meet the current energy code. And then if you are getting public funding or any kind of tax credit or anything like that, there is a whole set of rules through the Department of Interior, Federal Secretary of Interior Department, where they list through the entire process, a very, very critical process of Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, lay it all out with regard to what you're going to do, how you're going to achieve these tax credits, what you're going to save, and you go through the State Historic Preservation Office to make sure that everything stays in line and get yourself in the best position to achieve those credits. And if, a lot of times there's other grant funding that stipulate that, but we do have to walk our clients through a pretty meticulous process that is actually kind of fun and educational. But the hard part is like we can't do a lot of those things unless you really have to spend some money in order to save that building. But in the big picture, it's still typically cheaper than building a new building. It just kind of depends on what people's expectations are. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that.
I would just agree. I would say that people shouldn't be afraid of them. They can be exciting, but there are just some extra steps you have to go through. And a lot of times it's up to the person renovating that building. If, like Tim said, you're going for those tax credits, you have to go through a lot harder process. If you're not, the rules aren't as strict. However, you need to try and follow them. We don't want these buildings destroyed, but there's kind of two paths. And coming and talking to us, or DECAL, or finding a historic architect to come in and assess the building right away really helps. Like, what level of historic preservation is required? What is the history of that building? Because sometimes the history is it's been remodeled 6 times. That is its history, even though it may have an appearance that, oh, we can't touch it. Sometimes that's not the case. So shouldn't be afraid of them, ask questions, and come to the right people.
And not that, I guess to tag on to what the guys here have said, just for instance, is the Florence Crittenden Project Sunshine project that we're the architect on. As you know, that's the Cooney building, so originally built as the Cooney Hospital or the county hospital in 1937-38. And so the lore is that the Fort Peck Dam builders went from there to here and built that building. And so it's actually, that building was built by dam builders, and it's all concrete. So I can agree with that. And yeah, the first thing we had to do was add a stakeholder, and that stakeholder was the State Historic Preservation Office to be a part of that, and also the County Preservation Office. And so bringing them into the mix and working with them to make sure that we're not creating any other issues or taking away that character. And over the years, that building has been a hospital, it's been a convalescent home, it's been an office building. And so we actually tore most of it apart and rebuilt it back to nearly how it was, and still creating that use that Florence Crittenden needs as well. So.
I meant to add something really quick about historic projects, is that one of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize is that if you're fully restoring a historic building, then obviously that is, I think it's a little more straightforward. There's a lot of research, and then how can we do some of those things in a modern way, or how can we do some of those historic looking things with modern materials and modern methods and meeting current code. But with a lot of times, if you're adding on to a historic building, maybe renovating it as well, and you're not doing tax credits, or even if you are doing tax credits, or designing a historic district, which has requirements, the Secretary of Interior requirements actually pretty much require you to not make it look like the historic building. They do not want it to look like the historic building. So I think there's a lot of people that be like, I would love if they made that addition just bigger, more of the same thing. People love historic buildings, but it's actually kind of against the rules. We can't really do that. Well, they wanted to see a clear distinction of what's new and actually understand what part of that building is old.
And just one more real quick, based on what Tim had just said, and again, back to the Florence Crittenden project, the back north side had never been built, that third level on it, actually second above ground. And so when we were working with the Department of Interior, they said it cannot look like it had always been there. And so if you drive around it, you'll see it's just a tiny bit different for that reason.
Well, good morning. Interesting presentation. I'm Michael O'Neill with the Helena Housing Authority, and appreciate the focus on affordable homes. It's probably the biggest challenge we face in this community for our working families and for our aging population, persons with disabilities and such. And at the Housing Authority, we're working on efforts that will transform all of our existing public housing and add additional housing in the coming years. So it's an exciting time. The big challenge we face is the lack of resources on federal, state, and local level, and that's related to the skyrocketing costs. I would like you to comment on what you're seeing in the last 4 or 5 years in terms of the cost environment and what what your concerns are, particularly with things like the fires in California impacting construction costs.
Great question. I think one of the things that we're most concerned about are the material costs. And COVID aside, things have now started to come back down to where they are. But now that we're looking at potential tariffs, we're also looking at the fires, and that's going to have a huge impact. And so there's concern of what's wood pricing going to do. It's probably not what we're going to see at COVID. At the height of COVID, I think it was $1,500 a board foot. And typically it's in that $200 to $300 a board foot. I don't think we'll see that, hopefully not. But from the affordable housing standpoint, I think we just learned here a couple weeks ago that Helena is now the #2 most expensive place to live in Montana. And so we're going to have to work through that part of it. But as Tim talked about in the slides that he was going through, that's our job. Our job is to really work with people to make them the most quality spaces that we can, and not focus more on what the largest that it can be too. And so we can get more bang for the buck, if you will, and help those folks out that really need that housing.
Yeah, I would say it's really challenging. We live it kind of every day. We talk to our contractors, we read the news. The most challenging piece is the unpredictability of it. And our job is to make sure the expectations are realistic. So when someone comes in like, it's $200 a square foot, I know I can do it. And our job is to say, well, we're not seeing that, we're not hearing that. So let's talk about what is your dream? How can we make that fit? That's our responsibility, because we don't want someone to get all the way through a project and they go out to bid it and they can't build it. That is like our worst nightmare. That's the last thing we ever want to see ever happen. And so our job is to make sure we're always looking at it. So when a project comes up, it is assessed every time. What are we building it out of? Who is building it? What is the labor market like? So it's not really generic. It's like, what is your project? Where is it located? And how specific is it? So we will assess it every single time and make sure that expectation is met. And that is kind of a dynamic shift. Montana was build a big home, we have the space. Well, the cost is so expensive, so let's build the right sized home. And let's fit that budget and make it work. And so that's a kind of a dynamic shift that I think you're going to see is smaller, better homes.
Could I ask everyone to speak a little more closely into the microphone? We are losing some of your words. Thank you.
I would echo what these guys are saying, but I would also add that I think some of it goes all the way upstream to the funding of some of these projects, and I think that there's a really good attention being paid to this, but I also feel like architects in general, contractors, engineers, I think that a lot of our policy maybe could benefit from hearing from those groups more, so we got to get up there and speak out about it more. If not, run for office. That's not going to be me. But I do think that a lot of times these policies are being somewhat generated by, or they're being generated by, farmers and ranchers and people that may not necessarily. In fact, a lot of times farmers and ranchers, they're kind of built to say we can do all of this and we don't need an architect and we don't need a contractor. They're incredibly talented people. They can do all of that, but they're able to build a building on their property for a third of what you would have if you could build the same building in a community that requires building code and permit and all these different things that isn't just a state inspector coming out or something. That's a different frame of mind of how some of this funding needs to be looked at from a budgeting process. So I think feeding all the way upstream is going to help some of that, but it's extremely unpredictable. And one of the best things we could have for our construction costs is a bit of a lull in the maybe call it a recession. But I also feel like that's on the flip side. That's one of the worst things that people want to have across the board.
Just to build on that last question, what are you thinking about when you're trying to get control costs on projects? What sorts of things are you thinking about from a value engineering standpoint? Are there construction methods or form factors that can help residential projects get closer to being affordable, especially for like starter home type stuff, affordable for folks with typical wages community?
Yeah, I'd have you guys answer that. You might do a little more housing than we do.
Yeah, I think it's really trying to keep it simple. Once again, it's always kind of a moving target. For a while there, steel stud was cheaper than wood, and then what's our labor market like? So it's really trying to keep it simple. One thing that's interesting about architecture and the construction world, it really hasn't changed significantly for 100 years. We're not building a lot different than we did 100 years ago. So I think a lot of it is thinking differently about the scale and the size and how much space does it take to live. So we don't want to cram people into too small, but I think that's probably the #1 target is having people understand how can we live it in a little bit more dense way, use less, and get more out of it. That's really the baseline of where to start, is less is more.
I think just real quick to add on what Matt said too, is we like to design to a 4-foot module. That is what exactly thank you, Matt. That is exactly what lumber is built around. And so just to go to a 4-foot module, keep that a simple, efficient home that's sustainable. So our ancestors built that way, and I don't know why we can't do the same thing. And so if we elongate it on an east-west axis, we're taking care of the natural solar angle path, and then our winds from east to west too. And if you're in Flaxville, the winds are never a problem. And so it's just harnessing that, and we can make it very, very efficient. And so I think as we look at more affordable housing, just going back to that example will help us further down the road.
Well, I'll take back the mic here. It's 8 o'clock. We like to knock off right at 8, but thank you, gentlemen, very, very much. Let's give them a hand. Tom, thanks for extending the invitation. Let me just plant a seed here, just a real brief seed. I'll go back to Dean's first question about your dream project. And I would say this, the last time I went to Washington, D.C. was in 2017, and I was packing around the long-range plan for the redo of Stewart Homes on Montana Avenue. And I took that to the congressional offices and had some very good discussions there. So the redo of Stewart Homes is a priority for Michael O'Neill and the Helena Housing Authority. And I would just plant the seed in the gentlemen's minds about the importance of that project. And there's a great deal that could be done, needs resources, Congressman Dowling. So I'll just leave it at that for now, but I hope it'll stimulate some thinking, and maybe, Michael, you could talk to these gentlemen and talk to our congressman who was so gracious to be with us today. And with that said, it's 8:02. We like to knock off right at 8. I know you guys got to get to work. Time for my morning nap. So thank you all very, very much. We got some great stuff coming up the next couple of weeks, so we'll see you again. Thank you.